I am a card-carrying member of Weenie Hut Jr. Outside of select splashes into the cosmic core of Bloodborne or Resident Evil Zombie Outbreak, I avoid spooky games like the T-Virus. So when I think of my scariest gaming memories, they lie in unexpected frights hidden in otherwise brighter delights. A sudden bout of weakness in an otherwise dominant adventure, unrelenting pursuits by imposing threats, or worse, being faced with an inescapable omen brazenly spelling your doom. I'm fascinated by these uncharacteristic moments of terror. So today, I'd like us all to flip on our nightlights, get cozy under our bwankies, and put on our bravest faces as I share the darkest depths of my gaming fears. Let's just check under the bed first. Oh god. It's today's sponsor, Dungeon Hunter 6. A new entry in the hack and slash franchise, you play as a bounty hunter slaying bosses. The thrill of battle is only the beginning. You can bend your fallen adversaries to your will, ride them, fly them, or even summon them in battle to perform unique combos. There's over 100 to conquer, making for nigh limitless battle configurations. When not engaging in combat, stealth sections have you turn into a cat that's adorably inspired by a real cat that lives with a dev team. All of this is realized with high-end mobile graphics, with animations optimized for the hardware, ensuring smooth visual performance. Other activities include entering a guild with your mates and participating in guild wars, experimenting with a wide variety of skill trees to make unique builds, and trade items via the auction system. Download the game for free on Android and iOS using my link in the description or the QR code on screen, and you'll receive a special starter pack. And if you start now, you're free to enter the Lucky Spin launch event for a chance to win iPhones, PS5s, Apple Watches, and more. Thanks to Dungeon Hunter 6 for sponsoring today's video. The first and only Strand-type game is oozing with Kojima's signature strangeness, such as otherworldly shades attached to the mortal plane via umbilical cords that, upon detecting you, turn into vile beasts capable of devouring you. Vor is only the beginning, as becoming Deathly Dinner detonates a catastrophic explosion capable of leveling entire cities. That is the risk you take to deliver neats their packages. The only way to mitigate the danger is to channel your inner Solid Snake. Slither your way stealthily through dozens of dangling fiends, using your BB to measure the proximity of these invisible terrors. As your heart skips a beat during the slowly amplifying Audra deck flickers, your BPM rises with it in equal turn. BB's cries induce primal stress that boils over as you hold your breath on the precipice of detection. If you fail, splashes of alien footsteps crash after you, with contact spawning those hungry beasts. They are only made more terrifying by the mystifying lore surrounding them. Why is something so riddled with death tied to the mortal world via umbilical cords a symbol of supporting life? Why do they feed on humans? Why does their diet have results more explosive than a night at Taco Bell? Death Stranding may be a slow-paced delivery simulator, but any moment with these ethereal horrors injects abrupt agony for the faint-hearted. If their unnerving invisibility puts you on edge, the many Dark Souls fans on my channel may be disturbed to learn of an enigmatic parasite feeding on the dregs of humanity from the shadows. In places where the stench of death and lost souls is overpowering, you may be unlucky enough to spot one of these monstrosities. The Vagrants, the rarest enemies in the franchise, are powerhouses capable of one-shotting players to further death for discovering their unsightly feast. But it isn't the sheer power that scares me. It's the sudden, unexpected appearance of an enemy so rare, most players have never seen one. And the idea that in an already ruthless world, there is an ever-present yet unseen custodian of your failure, just waiting to consume your life essence. Ugh. At least Dark Souls wears its ruthlessness on its sleeve. Nintendo's Paper Mario is the last place I expected to cower in fear. Yet the fantastical pursuit of treasure suggests a demon lurks behind this ancient thousand-year door. Collecting the crystal stars to unleash this evil requires you to visit places like Twilight Town, where families are being torn apart by a bell, turning townsfolk into porkers every time it tolls. Or the ghoul within creepy steeple that commits identity theft. Yeah, he steals your body, leaving you a shade, with all of your friends convinced you are now the enemy. You can only thwart the body snatcher by saying his real name, an impossible task because he steals a necessary letter from the alphabet. Being isolated from your body, having all of your allies try to erase you from existence, and having to descend the depths of a haunted mansion is existential horror too deep for the target audience. But it's the flashy glitz pit that lived rent-free in my childhood nightmares the most. A thrilling chapter of battle in the ring on the surface, your rise through the ranks as the Great Gonzalez is undermined by an air of ominous deceit. Former rivals suddenly go missing, and threatening calls from restricted numbers turn curiosity into terror. Your fears are realized when you find the rotting husks of the MIA wrestlers in an attic, only to discover that the ringleader is sapping the vitality of his fighters to maintain his youth. Flattening him is a cathartic end to his reign, but the lead up is a perfectly paced descent into panic. Minecraft's most chilling enemies offer no such relief. Here I am in a boundless canvas for creativity in a seemingly cozy world. Sure, survival mode subjects you to zombies and creepers, but they are more of a mild nuisance even if the latter is an expert at jump scares. It's all fun and games until the Endermen appear. These slender succubi of comfort are docile at a glance, that is, until you match those piercing violet eyes for a quarter second and hear their unnatural stride quickly devolves into a series of frantic teleports intermixed with bashing your brains in for daring to stare. Hitting them causes further blinks away and further perpetuates their rage. Besting one is a horrifying feat that, while manageable with high-end tools, is a horrific trial in distressing sound design, ending its demise with a final sinister. If you're steely in the face of the Enderman's short, sporadic screams, perhaps you'll go weak in the knees for a more methodical pursuit. Tomb Raider 2's early mansion sequence has Lara Croft training for her next adventure. Yet in the distance, there's this eerie rattling noise. As you walk around the mansion, these ambient sounds make you feel like there's someone watching you as they grow louder and louder until, Jesus Christ! It's just a butler trying to serve you tea, or so you think. What he's actually trying to serve you is death by China. No matter where you hide, he will never stop hunting you. Clatter, 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 and his unnerving moans. As an 8-year-old playing this, I thought this was some sort of slasher villain simulator. Why didn't they at least give him a voice line saying, "Would you like some tea?" God, maybe that would have made it worse. The only way to stop Laura's branded pursuit from this harbinger of death is to lock him in the freezer, where he surely sustains himself on his endless supply of warm tea until he can escape and finally finish you. The only thing I feared catching me more than Winston the Butler as a child? Batman. Yeah, har har, he only goes after the baddies. Well, as a kid, the animated series had me believing he was lurking around every corner, ready to pounce. Kinda like Man-Bat's jump scare in Arkham Knight. Good lord, Rocksteady, the amount of times you grapple to a vantage point across a playthrough lulls you into this false sense of security, only for this to happen at random. The franchise is no stranger to scares, with Arkham Asylum's morgue putting you in first person for Scarecrow to toy with you, Killer Croc hunts you in his lair with sneaky sound mechanics that amplify tension, but no, none of the villains are what I fear, it's still the Dark Knight himself. I was on to him the moment he jump scared you when viewing his lair through the eyes of Jim Gordon. It's not until Joker's in the driver's seat at the end of the game that you get a true window into how I see Batman. No matter where you turn, he's watching you. He is inescapable. He is the deep anxiety that lurks in the darkness waiting to swallow you whole. The villains of Gotham, being on the receiving end of this Cape Crusader, have my condolences. But I guess they do have it coming. At least I was old enough to somewhat stomach this spooky sequence. As a kid, Majora's Mask left me permanently scarred. I'm convinced that the profits of Ocarina of Time were spent on a massive LSD binge, and this unlikely sequel is the hellspawn that resulted. Every ounce of this game bleeds despair. Granted, I wouldn't know all the horrors that lurk throughout the game because I quit in the opening hours. All thanks to the madness of the Masked Salesman. After a little body horror with Link being mutated into a Deku scrub, the dire situation is summed up in the most unsettling way from a sudden stranger. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? As if a precursor to this entire interaction, uncanny jump cuts and animations add a frenetic pace to his desperate pleas for you to return a mask stolen by an imp who cursed you. In exchange, he can return you to normal. Sure, definitely trust the word of a man with this hanging off of his bag. After barely escaping the end of the world by a moon with nightmare fuel for a face crashing into it, your first warp back in time greets you with another lovely interaction with this creep. He assumes since you got the ocarina, you've returned with his mask. When he finds out this isn't the case, he chokes the life out of you. I cannot. Watching this ghoul of an adult wringing the neck of a child with his angry eyes is such an absurd sight. One that haunted me to my core as a kid. Adults are meant to be a safety valve for your peanut brain, not mad monsters ready to smash your windpipe. That was it. As a kid, I hit the power button and did my best to yeet this out of my memory. Yet this terrible fate always lingered in the back of my mind. When I did finally play the game again as an adult, this interaction is equally terrifying for different reasons. For someone of his ominous presence to be so terrified of the mask that went missing, what horrors does it have in store? Majora is a demon of unparalleled terror that funnels despair into every inch of this abominable masterpiece. Yet I will never forget that salesman that had his mask as only one of many horrors he had to offer. A similar foray into the retro space as an adult that chilled me to the bone was Metal Gear Solid 2. Using the Codex Conversations, previously a way of delivering vital information and fleshing out the narrative, to make you slowly question the legitimacy of what you're hearing, was an unnerving descent into misinformation. It's a perfect interlude into the final plot points revolving around controlling human consciousness to prevent society from regressing due to the digital era drowning out the truth with a sea of false information. When I played this in college, it seemed like a foreboding warning of what might come. Reflecting on it today, it seems like a prophetic vision. Using AI to obscure the truth is as real a fear today as the anxiety I felt as the conversations write and receive became more and more unhinged. There are many layers of fear from these interactions, from their pacing into a descent of self-doubt, and the disturbing way they foretell real horrors of our everyday reality. Bioshock is another series that takes a crack at philosophical ideals and applies them in shocking ways, at times to disturbing effect. Big daddies are foreboding enemies that guard little sisters waiting to siphon your life energy out with a massive syringe. Your entry into Rapture in Infinite forcibly baptizes you, a literal fear of being drowned, and a spiritual one for those who would prefer to abstain from the prophet's teachings. But if there's only one moment I can choose, it's the Museum of the Founding Fathers. Elizabeth, having given up herself to save you, leads us to a world where she is everything Comstock hoped she would be. A tyrant who burns down the heathens with immeasurable reality-bending powers. If that tone isn't enough to inspire panic as you desperately seek to save her, you're forced to do so through corridors full of ghostly asylum patients dressed as America's founding fathers. If you're discovered by the patrolling grotesque alarm monsters, they'll become possessed and ruthlessly attack you, all while screaming and pleading for death. It's unsettling to say the least, with your foray into this hell being capped by opening the door to save Elizabeth in a short cutscene, only to turn and be face to face with an alarmed demon, screaming for the hordes to come slaughter you. Jump scares normally aren't memorable, but there was little left for the fathers to defeat with my soul having already left my body. Otherworldly threats like these on the surface are terrifying, but what about below the surface? I'm speaking of the vast oceans inaccessible to land-breathing mammals that adds an eerie mystery to what lurks beneath. Subnautica gives us a chance to answer these questions, but like the masked salesman before it, this is another entry I squirmed out of in fear before discovering the most horrifying threats. There's something about being in a place where you are at a disadvantage that just destroys me. In a place where I can't breathe, can't see, disorienting pressure from the water, all the while everything surrounding you is built to thrive in that environment. Sure, most things there fear you more than you do them, but what about those that don't? What about the predators that are just waiting for something as vulnerable as you to fall into their clutches? That is what the threat of the Reaper Leviathan sounds like to me, and it's one I am personally way too afraid to face. in no small part because it shares a partial moniker with one of my greatest gaming fears, the Reapers of Mass Effect. The ocean may be unsafe waters for humans to tread in, but it's a drop in the vast sea of space that we are mere minnows in. The threats of Saren to intergalactic peace feel like your standard space western of hunting down the baddie. That is until it turns out he is a mere puppet for his spaceship. It sounds silly until you come face to face with Sovereign, a dreadnought of coming extinction for the galaxy. There is an impersonal disregard for anything you have to say in your conversation. It becomes dreadfully apparent the gap in power, knowledge, and purpose you share with this otherworldly being. The powerlessness you feel in this moment is palpable. And that's to say nothing about them using tons and tons of living biomass to reproduce, and using the husks of your race to fight against you, like the terrifying Banshees, who are spin-offs of the Asari's Ardat Yakshi, who are essentially black widows who are addicted to fucking you to death. And then they turn into these monsters that scream. Just like the Enderman. You have to descend into an entire monastery of these monsters, which is enough fleeting despair for one day as far as I'm concerned. Happy Spooktober, everybody. I feel sufficiently prepared for Hallows Eve after reliving my gaming nightmares, though I'm sure this hardly scratches the surface of what frights are out there, so be sure to share yours with me in the comments. I'll be sure to wait until the dead of night to scroll through those horror stories. If I make it out alive, I'll see you in the next video.